My name is Alan Smith. I'm the UNESCO Chair in Education at the University of Ulster. The report that we're launching today is based on an independent review that we carried out for the Integrated Education Fund. The review asked us to look over the past 10 years at a range of documentation, to look at political party manifestos, to look at education policy documents, to look at public attitude surveys, research evidence, examples from other countries, and indicate what have been the changes over the past 10 years, really since the peace agreement, in terms of attitudes towards integrated education, commitment to developing policies that support integrated education, etc. It's very clear, particularly from the political party manifestos, that there has been a real shift in the discourse over the past 5 years. Initially, the Belfast Agreement, early education policy documents meant that the Department of Education had a statutory responsibility to support and encourage the development of integrated education. But when you actually look at the political manifestos over the past 5 years, whenever you look at the education policy documents, the language has shifted to talking really about shared education and supporting and developing that. There's no mention, for example, of integrated education in the new education bill. The bill is about to create a new education and skills authority, but there is no representation of right for integrated education included in that. The most recent ministerial working group that's been set up to look into these issues makes no mention of integrated education. So, you could say that it's not imagination, it's not paranoia. There has been a real shift, as evidenced in the review that we have carried out.
Why do you think that change of emphasis has occurred? What has come into public debate?
I think our review shows that there's been a real change, particularly since the 2005-6-7 kind of time. Three main reasons for that. One, there's devolution of responsibility for education policy to our own local politicians, which I think has had a significant impact. Secondly, there was the Bain review, which highlighted that we have, currently we have 85,000 unused places in our schools. And the Bain report at that time argued for much more rationalisation and integration in education for educational, social and economic reasons. And thirdly, since 2007 in particular, there's been significant funding put into shared education by charitable foundations, the International Fund for Ireland. I think somewhere between 10 and 20 million pounds has been invested in this over the past 5 years.
So what do you see as the policy implications of the report that you're publishing today? What's the message from it to the education community and to the political community?
Well, I think the message is, particularly with our ministerial working group beginning to report on what the way forward might be, I think it's more than semantics. I think it's important to look at these three policy options and consider, in times of economic constraint, where as a society we need to invest in our education policy. Do we, for example, pursue all possible avenues to try and secure more joint common schooling? And there are a number of starting points that we could suggest for that. Do we put our limited education budget into providing incentives, perhaps, for those schools that do have children from another tradition, into increasing that, to becoming more mixed, to becoming more welcoming of other traditions? That would be a second policy direction. A third policy direction would be to accept that for the foreseeable future our schools are going to be separate, and we should be spending funding on encouraging cooperation between separate schools, making arrangements for children to have shared lessons in each other's schools, organising pupils and teachers to cooperate, a little bit of movement between the schools. I think those are three quite distinct policy options. Each may have a different financial implication as well, and certainly each might have a different implication in terms of the sort of future society that we're aiming education policy to support.
And which of the three would you, as an education expert, prefer to see realised?
Well, I think I'd be the same as what opinion polls have told us over 10 years. The majority of parents and ordinary citizens in Northern Ireland would wish is that all our children are attending common schools. It seems it would be efficient in terms economically, and some of the research that we've reviewed suggests that there are benefits educationally and socially. And I think it would be one of the fundamental ways in which we would interrupt the mechanism by which we reproduce from generation to generation a narrative for our young people that we are two separate and divided communities. So I think if we were to make inroads there, along with inroads into the segregation we have through housing, and also even in terms of the way we organise our own politics, those would be three big drivers of this sort of two communities narrative that seems to be tripping us up, even so long after the peace agreement.